Freezers don't bother me. What moved inside this one still does. The first thing you notice in an overflow freezer is the color. Everything is some version of white or stainless steel except the toe tags. Those are manila, sometimes a little gray from handling. Above all of it, the fan hummed low and steady hum, click, hum. It was a winter overflow job in western Pennsylvania. Too many deaths, not enough cold storage, and the county hated when bodies stacked. They needed a licensed funeral director, someone who could sign chain of custody. So they called me, and the fan answered first, click, I clocked in at 10:42 p.m. after our own building closed. The night manager handed me a clipboard and a key card like it was nothing. Just empty the freezer, log temp, sign off, he said. His shoes squeaked away down the hall, leaving me with that mechanical breathing, click, The state regs are simple on paper. Storage below 40 degrees Celsius, proper identification on every decedent, no unlicensed staff, handling chain of custody. The sticker on the freezer read 34 degrees, which is standard for long-term hold. The digital display flickered once when I checked it, then settled under the drone of the fan, click, I signed my name on the log facility, Westridge Chapel Overflow, licensed director Daniel Hart, arrival time, 22:44. No one ever reads those, unless something goes wrong. The pen scratched across the paper, barely audible under that constant low motor, click, I slid the key card, heard the magnetic lock release, and pulled the freezer door open. A wave of dry cold rolled over my face and into my lungs. It didn't sting. It just stripped the warmth off everything it touched. Behind it, the fan dropped one note lower before catching again, That tiny hitch made me pause for half a second. Commercial units cut in and out all the time, especially older ones. Thermostats, cycle compressors kick. Nobody calls a repairman over one hiccup. I told myself that and stepped inside boots, hitting the metal grate while the blades leveled out, click, Overflow freezers don't look like movie morgues. No drawers, no dramatic sliding doors, just rolling racks and body bags on stainless shelves. These bags were the heavy-duty kind, with black nylon zippers and reinforced handles. Everyone had a toe tag clipped to the end, swaying a little in the fan's breath. Click, The procedure that night was straightforward. Confirm internal temp with my own thermometer, match each tag to the manifest note condition, prep for transfer. Rigor mortis usually passes by the 24-hour mark, liver fixes a few hours before that. After that, tissue stiffness is mostly about refrigeration, not muscle chemistry, and the room agreed quietly, Click, I started with the top rack left to right, like I always do. First bag male, late 70s, myocardial infarction, time of death, 32 hours prior. I checked his toe tag, flipped the manifest page, and noted rigor resolved. Livor fixed posterior. No visible compromise of bag. The zipper teeth were sealed tight and the plastic lay slack in the gentle airflow. Click, I inserted my probe thermometer through the small resealable port on the bag. It beeped after a few seconds, reading 37 degrees at the abdomen. Exactly where I wanted him, cold enough to slow decomposition, not so cold that freezer burn started. I wiped the probe with a chlorhexidine swab while the beeping faded back under the steady hum, click, Second bag, third, fourth. Same pattern, same numbers within a couple degrees, same dull waxy color through the plastic. This is the part nobody understands. Unless they've done it, the work gets boring. That's why when something is even a little off, you feel it before you hear it under the fan, click, Near the middle of the rack, I saw it. One bag sat just a few inches off square, angled toward the aisle. Somebody had probably rushed the placement after a busy removal. I made a mental note, slid my hands under the side handles, and pushed it back into line, while the fabric rustled against the shelf. Hum. Click. Hum. For a split second, the weight inside seemed to lag behind my push. Not enough to call movement, just enough that my shoulders registered resistance. Then the whole thing slid into place, smooth and heavy like it should. I let go, took one step back, and the sound in the freezer settled again. Click. I should have stopped there. Instead, I kept working down the row. Temperature tag manifest note. Male COPD, female sepsis, another male overdose. Causes change, but the details repeat, and the fan never gets tired. Click. My breath came out in thin clouds as I moved. The cold was dry enough that my knuckles started to crack when I flexed my gloves. I felt skin pulling under nitrile the way it does after too many winter removals. The noise of my own joints seemed louder than the motor for a second, before the hum swallowed it. Click. I checked the wall clock mounted just outside the door. 11:06 p.m. Good pace. If I stayed on schedule, I'd be done with inventory before midnight, and the compressor agreed to keep running. Click. When I reached for the same angled bag again, it was subtle. The handles were aligned now straight with the shelf edge like I'd left them. But the toe tag wasn't where my hand expected it to be. It hung a little closer to the floor, turning slowly in the draft, creaking softly on the metal clip under the fan. Click. I frowned and picked it up. Name, age, case, number, time of death, everything matched the manifest. Someone could have clipped it lower without thinking. There's no law about exact tag height. Still, I wrote a small check mark in the margin next to his case number, while the cardboard swayed in my grip. Click. On instinct, I put one gloved hand on the end of the rack and pulled. The shelf slid out along its rails with a dry scrape of metal on metal. Halfway out, I heard a faint plastic on steel sound from inside the bag. It was a single short drag, then nothing, quickly swallowed by the motor. Click. I froze with the rack halfway extended. In that position, the bag sagged a little at the center, the weight distributing forward. Fluid redistribution can do that, serum pooling gases shifting after a day or two in the cold. I reminded myself of that, even as my fingers tightened on the rail and the hum seemed to press against my eardrums. Click. I leaned in a little closer and watched the plastic. No rise, no fall, no obvious shift in contour. The outline of the body was what you'd expect: shoulders, chest, hips, legs all pulled down by gravity. The zipper lay flat along the midline, black against pale vinyl, completely still, except for the soft tremor from the fan. Click. Metal contracts, I muttered just loud enough to hear my own voice. I don't talk to myself much on shift. You sound crazy even to your own ears. But saying it out loud made the explanation feel more official, like something you could write in an incident report. My breath fogged the plastic near the foot of the bag, then disappeared into the background noise. Click. I pushed the rack the rest of the way out to finish the check. Probe, in wait for the beep record, the number move on. The thermometer read 35°, a touch warmer than the others, but within acceptable range. I told myself bodies cool at different rates, especially with bulkier builds, and the device beeped 3 times before falling quiet under the fan. Click. That little discrepancy stuck in my head longer than it should have. It's normal to have a 2-degree swing. Inspectors don't care unless it spikes. Still, I circled the reading lightly on the sheet, not hard enough to tear the paper. The scratch of the pen felt loud in the empty room, then got lost again in the mechanical breath. Click. I slid the rack back in and moved down to the next row. Lower shelves always smell a bit different, closer to the floor drain, closer to the condensate. Even with sealed bags, you learn to read the air, a hint of sweet here, a trace of chemical there. Tonight, all I tasted was Freon, an old disinfectant carried on that same endless vibration, hum. Click, hum. A drip had frozen along the interior wall, a clear icicle catching the fluorescent light. I caught myself staring at it for a moment, tracking the way it narrowed toward the tip. That kind of focus usually means you're tired. Your brain grabs anything simple to rest on. I blinked, looked away, and the blades overhead filled the silence I'd made. Click, By the time I finished the second rack, my fingers were starting to go numb. I flexed them inside the gloves, felt the tightness over my knuckles, shook out my wrists. That was when I hit my first and only flash of irritation. Why nobody had turned the unit down a degree or two before stuffing it full, I didn't know, and the fan offered no apology. Click, I checked the clock again. 11:19 p.m. I wasn't behind, but I wasn't ahead either. Somewhere in the distance, beyond the insulated walls, a compressor in another part of the building cycled off, leaving my own units hum clearer. Click, I turned back toward the first rack to verify that my count matched the manifest. My eyes went straight to the bag I'd adjusted earlier. From where I stood, it looked normal, lined up with the others, toe tag hanging zipper straight. But when I stepped closer, the reflection on the steel shelf told a different story, warping slightly away from the angle I knew I'd set, shimmering faintly under the fluorescent buzz and the soft motor drone hum. Click, The bag itself hadn't moved more than an inch, if that. It could have been my position, the height of my eyes, the bend in my neck. I knew all the ways perspective lies in stainless surfaces. Even so, my stomach tightened once, just for a breath, before settling back into the rhythm of the room. Click, I wrote the total count at the bottom of the page and underlined it. 23 decedents, all tagged, all logged, all at acceptable temperatures. On paper, that's all anyone would ever need to know about that hour. I glanced at the clock one more time, doing the math in my head, while the blades above me kept time their own way. Click, That was the first moment I wondered how long I could stay in there. The first thing I checked was that same bag, the one I had straightened earlier. The tag was wrong. It was turned the opposite way from my note on the log. In the manifest, I had written it clearly. Tag facing aisle. Name up. Now the cardboard rectangle pointed toward the back wall like someone had rotated it. The freezer door was sealed behind me. The red light on the ceiling camera blinked steady. I walked closer, boots ticking on the floor grate. The plastic of the body bag looked the same. Same outline, same crease lines. Only the tag had changed. I picked it up between two fingers. The clip was tight. I had to twist slightly to read the writing. Same name, same case number, same time of death 34 hours earlier. Okay, I said under my breath. Somebody else turned you. Nobody else should have been in here. Only licensed staff are supposed to touch tagged remains in Pennsylvania. That freezer was logged under my name and the chapel's nobody else's. I looked back at the door just to be sure. The latch was engaged. No gap in the seal. The handle sat straight down still. I slid my hand down the bag to straighten the tag. When my palm pressed near the ankle, the leg inside pushed back. It was not much. Just a small, quick resistance. Enough to stop my hand. Enough to feel like tissue trying to get away from pressure. Every piece of training I ever had came up at once. Rigor usually peaks around 12 hours, eases by 24. Passed a day in cold storage at 33 to 36 degrees. Most large muscle groups feel bored stiff from the refrigeration, not from life. This did not feel stiff. It gave under my glove then fought. I pulled my hand back fast, then forced it to go back down. I pressed again harder this time. The ankle stayed where it was, but the calf yielded first before it pushed, like a live leg trying not to move. My jaw clenched once. I made myself breathe out slow into the mask. Post-mortem spasm, I told myself quietly. Gas, fluid, whatever. It happens. It does happen. Gas can shift in the bowel. Serum can relocate. Bodies belch, twitch, even raise arms on the table sometimes. I've seen that. But not at 34 hours. Not at 34 degrees in a sealed bag on a shelf that cold. I should have stopped there. Instead, I reached for the handles. If something felt wrong, the manual said you verify, then transfer. You don't leave a questionable case sitting where no one watches it. I slid the rack out again and locked the wheels. The body bag sagged slightly toward me as it moved. I looped the side handles over my hands and took the weight. On an average adult, you expect the load to come through the hips and torso. This one felt like it was all in the middle. The shoulders lagged, then caught up like they were deciding whether to follow. I rolled a gurney in from the wall. Standard stainless frame hydraulic pump vinyl pad. We use them all day. You know their quirks the way a mechanic knows a jack. Easy, I said more to myself than anyone. I shifted the bag onto the gurney in one controlled slide. The wheels creaked once under the new weight. The fan overhead dipped and caught again. Cuck. I strapped the bag at the chest and hips. If I was going to move this case, I wanted no surprises. Loose weight in a tight hallway is how backs and faces get hurt. Before I rolled anywhere, I pulled my probe thermometer again. The bag had a resealable port near the abdomen, same as the others. I cleaned the tip, pushed it through, and watched the little digital display. It climbed faster than I liked. 35 degrees, 38 degrees, 41 degrees. Then it dropped back to 36 degrees so quickly the beeper glitched. I pulled it out, checked the batteries with my thumb. No corrosion, no crack in the casing. This probe had read steady all night. Come on, I whispered. Pick a number. I pushed it in again, a little further left. The screen blinked hard this time. 37 degrees my valve, then 39 degrees in valve, then down to 34 degrees valves, like something inside was tightening and releasing around the metal. The fan above me stuttered again. The tone changed for a breath. Kick. That was my first real hesitation. I felt it in my chest, not my hands. If you log erratic temps on one body and send it out, you invite questions. If you log it as normal and something comes back, you invite worse. I wiped the probe slower than I needed to. The chlorhexidine pad left a sharp chemical smell that cut through the cold. It didn't cover anything. It just layered on top. I circled the temp reading on the sheet. Not hard. Once lightly. That's it, I said. We're not staying on a shelf. I pushed the gurney toward the aisle. Its wheels rattled over the floor grate. The straps creaked softly against the bag. Halfway to the door, I stopped and stuck my head out into the hallway. The overnight attendant sat at the far desk, scrolling on his phone. He looked maybe 25. New hire. Hey, I called. Can I get a hand? He looked up fast. Yeah, sure. What's up? Need help with a heavy one, I said. Just a lift. Nothing weird. He smirked a little at that. They always do before they've seen anything. Then he followed me in, rubbing his arms against the sudden cold. Jesus, it's freezing in here, he said. That's the point, I answered. He grabbed the foot end of the gurney. I stayed at the head nearest the bag's upper half. We backed it away from the rack and lined it with the door. On 3, I said. 1, 2, on 2, the entire bag slid 3 inches toward me. It didn't shift with gravity. It dragged like something inside had thrown its weight in my direction. Hey man, he snapped. Don't yank it. I didn't, I said. We both froze for a second. The straps were still fastened. The vinyl under the bag was dry. There was nothing slick to explain that slide. "You pulled?" he said again, softer. "I didn't," I repeated. My voice came out flatter than I expected. We stared at each other. Neither of us said what we were both thinking. I broke eye contact first. "Let's just move it," I said. "Watch your footing." We pushed the gurney toward the threshold. The fan behind us kept up its low complaint, click, As the front wheels reached the door frame, the sound cut out. No fade, no slow wind down, just silence. The sudden quiet rang in my ears. I could hear the plastic of the bag settling. I could hear the click of the attendant's teeth when he swallowed. Then from behind us, a single metal clang. It came from inside the freezer. Not from the gurney, not from the door. It sounded like one of the empty shelves had slammed against the back wall. The attendant jumped hard enough that he let go of the gurney. "Hell no," he said. "I am not doing this." "It's probably just the rack," I said. "You can finish the paperwork," he shot back. "I'll go print the transfer slips." He was halfway down the hall before I could answer. His shoes squeaked away again, then nothing. I was alone with the bag. The fan kicked back on inside the box. The hum returned like it had never stopped. Click. That was the moment I realized this wasn't going to stay in the weird but explainable category. I pushed the gurney fully into the prep area just outside the freezer door. I parked it parallel to the counter, locked the wheels, and adjusted the overhead light. I wanted a clear view of the zipper and the tag. I checked my watch. 11:32 p.m. Time of death on the tag the previous day at 1:06 p.m. Pronounced in a local hospital. Cardiac arrest after failed resuscitation. We are not supposed to second-guess pronouncements. That's how the whole system works. Hospitals call time. We handle everything after. I told myself I was just verifying identification before transfer, nothing more. That's what you write if anyone ever asks. The zipper ran from the forehead to the mid-calf. I did not need the whole thing open. I told myself that twice. I pinched the pull between my thumb and forefinger. The metal was cold, even through the glove. I drew it down about a third of the way to mid-chest. The smell that came out was what I expected. Cold fabric, a trace of disinfectant, a hint of stale hospital air. What I did not expect was the movement. The chest under the sheet lifted, just slightly. The fabric rose maybe half an inch held, then sank again. I froze with my hand on the zipper. The fan above the prep table hummed softer than the one in the freezer, but I could still hear both. One high, one low. I watched the same spot, the sternum area, right between where the 5th and 6th ribs would meet the midline. It rose again, slow, down again. No gas shift looks like that. Gas distends and then stays or moves unpredictably. This had a rhythm. Slow but there. I told myself it could be trapped air escaping along the spine. Thoracic cavities do weird things when cooling. They burp. They settle. My hand went down by itself. I pressed my palm flat over the sternum through the sheet. Tissue should have felt like a cold countertop at that temperature. Hard, uniform, unforgiving. What I felt was a delay. The bone was there, but the soft tissue over it yielded a fraction of a second before it stopped. It pushed back against my hand, then sagged away like something inside had shifted, then relaxed. My throat clicked once when I swallowed. I realized I'd been holding my breath. I pushed again, firmer this time. Same thing. Give. Stop. Release. There was no visible condensation from my mouth on the sheet. No breeze. No one else in the corridor. I left my hand there longer than I should have. Long enough to feel it once more. That slow, impossible rise under my palm. The overhead light buzzed. The freezer fan behind me kept its own beat. Click. I pulled my hand back and zipped the bag up to the collarbones. Not all the way. Not yet. And I stood there, gloved fingers resting on cold vinyl, trying to do the math in my head. I know what rigor feels like at 12 hours. I know what liver looks like when it is settled and fixed. I know what refrigerated tissue is supposed to do under pressure after a day and a half in a 34-degree box. None of it matched what I had just felt. I did not call the hospital. I did not call the coroner. I did not call anyone. Instead, I checked my watch again. 11:41 p.m. I spent almost 10 full minutes after that standing alone in that prep room, trying to convince myself that what I had felt was trapped air and cooling tissue and not anything at all like a breath. Those 10 minutes I spent arguing with myself ended with a hum again. The freezer fan kicked on behind the door. Click. I was still in the prep room with the bag. Same gurney, same overhead light, same case. I told myself I was done second-guessing. Verification, then transfer. That was it. I moved back to the head of the gurney. The zipper sat at mid-chest. The vinyl was smooth. The tag was clipped near the foot. Something was already wrong. The right hand under the sheet was not where I had left it. Before, it had been flat along the flank. Now there was a small rise against the side seam near the ribs. The outline of fingers pressed outward, angling toward me. I stared at that spot for a full breath. Then I looked at the clock. 11:44 p.m. By every rule I work under in Pennsylvania, this man was still a decedent. Time of death recorded. Pronouncement signed. Chain of custody started. I reached down and picked up the toe tag. The cardboard shook once in my grip. Not much. Enough. I read his name out loud. First name. Last name. The plastic over the chest tightened. There was a quiet crackle of vinyl, like something inside had shifted to listen. I felt my throat hitch once. I swallowed it. I should have stopped there. Instead, I put the tag down and went back to the zipper. If I was going to send him out, that bag needed to be closed. No facility accepts a partial zip on transfer. I took the pull in my right hand. The metal felt colder than it had a few minutes earlier. I pulled it up slowly over the sternum toward the clavicles. Halfway up the torso, it stopped. Hard. It felt like it had snagged on a fold of the sheet. That happens all the time. You back off, straighten the fabric, try again. I stepped closer and pinched the vinyl around the track. The sheet underneath was smooth. No bunching, no knot. I bent down to get a better look at the teeth. The overhead light glared off the metal. I had to shift my head to block the reflection. That was when I saw the fingers. 2 of them. From the inside of the bag, they were pressing up under the zipper line. The fabric stretched tight over the proximal phalanges. The fingertips pushed into the underside of the track just enough to lift it. They were angled toward the pull in my hand, like they were trying to stop it from moving. For a second, my brain refused to label what I was looking at. It ran through alternatives: taped tubing, a crease, a fold. Then the right index finger flexed. It was a small movement. Down then, up then still. The vinyl creaked with it. My jaw tightened. I felt it lock just once. Okay, I said quietly. No. This was the one moment I got angry. Not at him. At the situation. The fact that whatever this was, it had landed on my table under my license. I set my left hand flat on the vinyl to steady it. With my right, I pressed down over the finger shapes. The tissue under them was firm, but not frozen. It compressed a few millimeters, then resisted. I pushed harder. The fingers did not move away. They held the track. I slid my hand up and caught what I knew was the knuckle. Through 2 layers of material, I could still feel the shape. I applied steady pressure, bending it and inward. The joint gave with a dull, slow motion. No jerk. No crack. Just a forced curl, like bending a gloved hand that does not want to bend. The zipper dropped a fraction of an inch as the tension eased. I moved to the second finger. Same process. Find the joint. Push. Wait for the reluctant give. The whole time, the freezer motor on the other side of the wall ran its low note. It dipped once while I worked My hands were steady, but my breathing wasn't. Each inhale sounded too loud under the hum. When both fingers were folded away from the track, I didn't give myself time to think. I pulled the zipper the rest of the way up in one smooth motion. It closed with a straight, clean sound. The bag looked like every other bag in the room now. Flat, sealed, ordinary. Nothing about this felt ordinary. I stepped back and wiped my gloves on the apron out of habit. There was nothing on them. No fluid. No residue. My instincts were screaming one thing. My training shouted the opposite. Call 911. Call the coroner. Call the hospital. Or respect the pronouncement. Respect the paperwork. Respect the system that says dead is dead when a doctor signs a time. If I was wrong and I called, I could lose my license. You don't keep your credential in this state if you drag emergency services into every odd twitch and artifact. They write you up as unstable. Word gets around. If I was wrong and I didn't call, then I had just forced 2 fingers off a zipper on a man who might not have been finished dying. There is no section in the manual for that. I checked the clock again. 11:49 p.m. I looked at the transfer paperwork waiting on the counter. Destination facility. Case number. Time removed from storage. Signature lines. I picked up the pen. My hand shook once enough to blot a dot of ink on the margin. Then it steadied. I signed my name on the first line, then the second. The strokes looked normal. It was everything around them that felt wrong. I unlocked the gurney and moved to the door. As soon as I pushed it open, the air changed. The hallway outside felt colder than the prep room. Not by temperature reading, by impact. I glanced at the wall thermostat out of habit. It read 68 degrees. Normal for the corridor. Didn't feel normal. Behind me, through the freezer door, I heard the metal racks vibrate. Not individually, all at once. A soft, synchronized shiver of stainless steel on rails. Then the fan inside the unit let out one long, high-strained note. It sounded like it was pushing against more than just air. K. And then it went back to baseline Click. I did not check the shelves. I did not want to know if anything had moved. I pushed the gurney down the corridor alone. The wheels rattled on the tile a little louder than they should have. Each bump sent a tiny shift through the bag, all of it within the range of gravity and motion. All of it still wrong. The attendant never came back to help. I finished the transfer, staged the gurney in the holding bay, and left the paperwork in the outbox. On my way out, I saw his jacket missing from the hook. His time card slot was empty. A week later, one of the office staff mentioned he had quit. Didn't last long at nights, she said. Kept telling people one of the bags leaned toward him. I didn't say anything. There was nothing helpful to say. After that shift, I stopped taking overflow freezer work. I stayed on services, arrangements, paperwork. I let the younger directors handle removals and cold storage. If a call came in after hours from that chapel, I passed it. They could call someone else. I lost a chunk of income doing that. My wife asked about it once. I told her I was cutting back night work. I did not tell her that every time a compressor kicked on in our garage fridge, my heart rate jumped. Even at our main location, I started avoiding the walk-in units. I'd send staff in for me if I needed a specific case pulled. When I had to go in myself, I never stayed longer than necessary. The sound of a fan over metal shelves is normal in this business. It's background. Most people stop hearing it after a month on the job. I never stopped hearing it after that night. A few weeks later, I was in the manager's office at West Ridge dropping off pre-need files. He had a stack of mail on his desk. A letter on top had the hospital's letterhead. He sighed and tapped it with 2 fingers. Another family upset about a pronouncement, he said. Same guy you transferred that night, I think. They're saying he was declared too fast. I did not pick up the letter. I did not ask what the hospital had answered. They're talking about signs, he went on. Movements, warmth. You know how it goes. People don't want to let go. My mouth felt dry. I asked which case number. He told me. It matched the one on my copy of the log. That night at home, I took my work bag into the attic and pulled out my carbon copy of the freezer sheet. Facility West Ridge Chapel overflow. Date and time. Temperature readings. Notes. Halfway down the page next to his case, I had written in small, neat letters, temp stable. No abnormalities. The rest of the ink on the sheet was crisp and dark. Those 3 words were lighter, blurry at the edges, like water had touched them. I touched the paper. It was dry. I turned it under the lamp. The distortion stayed with the words, not the angle. I could see my own signature at the bottom of the page. Under it, all 3 names you always get on a sheet like that, director. Facility rep, driver. My signature looked like it always does. 1 clean line, 1 hook, 1 loop. Directly beneath it, just touching the tail of my last letter, was another mark. Not a full name, not a word, just a small, smudged stroke of ink, as if another fingertip had brushed the line while it was still wet. I remember signing that sheet alone at the counter. No one else in the room. The pen had gone straight from my hand to the tray. The paper had gone straight into my bag. There is no way to prove that to anyone. The official record at West Ridge still says his body was removed from cold storage without incident. The hospital record still lists his time of death as the afternoon before. The family's complaint sits in some file with a case number and a polite response. All of it says the same thing: he did not move. But I know what my hand felt on his chest. I know what I had to pry off that zipper. I know I was the last person in that building to touch that paper. The file will always read that he never moved at all. I am the only one in that building who knows that isn't true. If you made it this far, thank you for staying with me. If this story stayed with you too, hit the like button so I know you want more cases like this. Share this video with someone who thinks they understand death work. Most people don't. And if you haven't yet, subscribe to the channel. There are more nights, more cases, and more unanswered details I haven't told you. Tell me in the comments, what do you think happened in that freezer I read every theory?